Well, all aspects of our lives have, of course, been upended by the COVID pandemic, including the housing market. It seems odd to say, but in the middle of this biggest economic crisis since the war, prices look to be shooting up. So what's happening? Rita O'Reilly's been speaking to those caught in a COVID property trap.
Shauna Glennon is a lawyer. Jonathan Ford works in financial services. Shauna is pregnant. Apartment with value, they own it. Mortgage approval, painless. Proof of funds, they have it. A professional couple in their 30s looking to trade up. And yet, they cannot.
It's a real milestone in our lives as young adults to be able to turn the key in our own house. Yet we're shut out of the opportunities that were afforded to our parents' generation.
It feels like a grown-up thing to do, to move into a house, and I'm kind of in my mid-30s now and I haven't done that yet.
Shauna and Jonathan returned last year after 2 years living and working in Canada, just in time for the pandemic.
We were looking forward to coming home and starting a family, and we're expecting our first baby at the moment, so we thought it would be a perfect time to purchase a home.
But they have found there are few homes to be bought. Jonathan can't help comparing Dublin with Toronto.
That's a city where they have a housing crisis as well, or at least they feel they have a housing crisis, and the comparison in terms of what's available and at what price is there isn't one. It's nice turnkey houses well within our budget in places you'd want to live. You know, the prices just don't seem to make sense when you look at them in Ireland, and in Dublin in particular. COVID has definitely shone a spotlight on it.
Jonathan grew up in Dublin 6. He expected to return to live there, but tight supply has forced their house hunting far beyond it.
We've been looking in areas in North and South Dublin. It seems to be mainly probate sales and generally houses that are in very poor condition.
Housing market analyst Dr. Ronan Lyons recalls that at the start of last year, the sales market was roughly in balance, with prices not really going up or down.
COVID has upended that. The number of homes coming onto the market has fallen by about 40% in some parts of the country. And as a result, with perhaps surprisingly strong demand and very weak supply, prices have gone up quite a bit. On average across the country by between 7 and 8%.
Short supply, rising prices. Although CSO figures today suggest by a more modest 3% nationally, 1.2% in Dublin in the year to February. But there's a more obvious problem. Buyers cannot get to view houses.
People are putting offers in on homes without having set foot in the property, without having been able to view it. And we just don't feel as though that's acceptable conditions under which to buy a home. I don't want to put an offer on a house that I haven't been able to set foot in and that I haven't seen in the flesh.
The Property Services Regulatory Authority agreed the policy with industry this time last year. Under current restrictions, the public can view properties by appointment only where the property has gone sale agreed and contracts for sale drafted. It means relying on photos and videos to make a bid. Jonathan thinks it's a recipe for disaster.
This idea of putting an offer on a house that you haven't stepped into, it reminded me of the kind of old ads on the radio of buying apartments off the plans in Bulgaria and stuff. Like it doesn't make, like, it's not logical. If you take a step back and look at it, it doesn't make sense.
The couple know they're in a good position compared to most. Their Milltown apartment may be small, but they own it. For now, they have pressed pause.
We're lucky in that we have that little bit of security. But at the same time, our lives are happening now. We're expecting our baby. We don't want to put things on pause for a year or 2 years or 5 years. We want to get on with things.
Ronan Lyons says demand is pushing up prices in cities like Dublin, Cork, Galway, Limerick and Waterford, but also in commuter belts.
The biggest increases have been in the counties around Dublin, so that suggests perhaps there is some effect of people being slightly freer to be a little bit further down the motorway networks.
One family prepared to bid in this market are Louise Goulding and Mark Spain. They have 2 children. Louise works for the HSE, Mark is a Garda. You can't get more typical trader-uppers.
We're very lucky in that we both work in the public sector and we're very secure in our jobs, and in terms of accessing a mortgage, that hasn't been an issue for us. We're ready to go, we have our funds.
They have experienced the past year as both sellers and buyers. Twice sales fell through of their small home in Carpenterstown. It was only when restrictions lifted in December and viewings resumed that they completed a sale. They've stayed at Louise's parents' home in Clonee, County Meath since. So far this year, they've bid on 3 houses, one this week.
Bidding has started on the asking price and has already risen in the first 24 hours since bidding has opened. We're being told that there is 3 or 4 other parties interested and that the estate agent is expecting it to go significantly over.
Their kids are at school this week in Castleknock. Their son has autism. His special need defines theirs. More space for 4 people within the school catchment area and close to a supportive community. But they're caught.
It's absolutely a seller's market at the moment. People are, buyers particularly, they're panicked and very despondent and just trying absolutely everything they can think of to secure a property. There's almost this kind of pressure or a feeling to almost try and bid on everything that's out there in the hope that something sticks. It's driving the price up for everybody.
Once we get out of level 5, especially if we get down to anything like a level 2 or 3 with more normality, I would expect supply to improve quite a bit. So if people can hold off, if you can't see it, that seems like an unnecessary risk.
But Louise and Mark feel they have no choice. 6 people living at close quarters is not ideal, and they're conscious of the COVID risk they bring daily into their parents' home. They are in a bind. Wait to bid later and risk more demand and prices rising as those with pandemic savings enter the market, or bid now without viewings.
When you walk into a house, there is a feeling or a vibe, but it's really hard to get a sense just based on photographs.
Louise and Mark have been outbid each time.
We've gotten, I suppose, caught up in some bidding wars with other interested parties in the hope that eventually we will go sale agreed.
They are effectively bidding blind. And there's a cost to the requirement to have contracts drafted before viewings.
You're expected to organise a valuer and a surveyor and inform your solicitor and kind of get the ball rolling in terms of getting contracts drawn up. So you could potentially spend a significant amount of money.
When you read those conditions, it's basically the government saying, we want everyone to stop transacting homes if you can. Either that's a reasonable request, in which case try and hold off. Again, it should be only for another few weeks, maybe a couple of months at most, until you can actually get in and see these. Or else, if it's an unreasonable request by the state, then we need to change that rule, because it's not fair for those who follow the rules and want to buy at the moment.
We took a walk through Dublin city centre on Saturday and saw luxury hotels that are lying empty and people lying in tents outside those hotels, living there. And that's the extreme end of the spectrum, and something that I think we're becoming desensitised to. We're certainly in more privileged circumstances than most, but it all relates to the same thing, this dysfunctional housing market that we have.
Rita O'Reilly reporting there. I'm joined in studio by Marion Finnegan and Lorcan Sir. I'll be chatting to you in a moment. But first I'm going to Foxford and Mayo, to Carol Kelly, who runs CK Properties in Ballina. Thanks so much for joining us tonight, Carol. I gather you're seeing in the West, very similar to what we heard there, a booming property market.
That's correct. We certainly are. And from listening to those couples there, we would definitely be seeing a lot of the Dublin couples moving to the west of Ireland, moving home, not necessarily to the areas they came from, but certainly moving to the west of Ireland. And for them, they have the salaries, they have the big budgets coming out of Dublin. And for them, I suppose, equally, the infrastructure would be very important, in particular trains in these commuter towns like Foxford and Ballina, whereby when the workforce returns to normal and people will want to maybe go back to the offices in Dublin for 1 day a week, they have the train systems in these towns and they have the big quality one-off houses for a fraction of what they would get in Dublin.
So how quick are they selling, Carol?
Our normal time from the property going to the market to sale agreed is normally 6 weeks.
Wow, that's pretty good. We heard there in Rita's report, a lot of the couples, they're almost panicking at this stage. Are you finding that with some buyers?